On June 23, 1985, Air India Flight 182 ascended gracefully into the Canadian skies. Embarking on what was to be a routine journey from Toronto to Bombay, the Boeing 747, named Kashinka, was a symbol of connection, bridging continents and carrying within it a microcosm of the world. Families, business travelers, and vacationers, each with their own stories and destination. But just a few minutes in the sky, a well-traveled route from Toronto to Bombay turned tragedy. This is the Enigma of Air India Flight 182. In the early 1980s, the world was a stage of burgeoning conflicts and emerging threats, where the echoes of the Cold War still resounded. But amidst this global backdrop, a more localized yet intensely fervent struggle was brewing, one that would inadvertently set the stage for one of the most tragic events in aviation history, the bombing of Air India Flight 182. The heart of this conflict lay in the Indian subcontinent, specifically in the southwestern state of Punjab, home to a significant Sikh population. A movement for independent Sikh homeland, known as Khalistan, had been gaining momentum. The separatist movement, though rooted in a long-standing conquest for autonomy, had escalated in the early 1980s, marked by an increasingly militancy and a sharp rise in communal tensions. The Indian government's response, particularly the Operation Blue Star in 1984, further fueled the fire. This operation aimed at flushing out militants from the Golden Temple of Amritsar, a sacred Sikh shrine, resulted in heavy casualties and widespread condemnation. In the diaspora, especially in Canada, which housed a substantial Sikh community, these events were closely followed. Some members of this community became entangled in the separatist movement, providing financial and logistical support. It was in this political charged atmosphere that the seeds of a heinous plot were sown, a plot that would culminate in the bombing of Air India Flight 182. Airport security in 1985 was a far cry from the stringent measures we know today. While there was an awareness of the potential for terrorist attacks, especially following incidents like the hijacking of Air India Flight 182 in 1982, security protocols were still evolving. Screening processes focused more on detecting conventional weapons rather than explosive. The booking of Flight 182 and the check-in process on that fateful day proceeded without any apparent red flags. Unbeknownst to the passengers and crew, a checked-in suitcase containing a bomb had been interlined from another flight. This luggage carrying the explosive device was loaded into Flight 182 during its stopover in Montreal. The bomb, expertly concealed and timed, would tragically fulfill its intended purpose over the Atlantic Ocean. On the morning of June 23, 1985, Air India Flight 182, a Boeing 747 named Kanishka, ascended gracefully into the sky, embarking on its journey from Toronto to Bombay. The flight, a familiar route connecting two distant lands, carried 329 souls, each with their own stories, dreams, and aspirations. Passengers mostly of Indian origin, including families, students, and professionals. Unbeknownst to them and the crew, nestled within the cargo hold was a suitcase that would steal their tragic fate. As the aircraft cruised at 31,000 feet above the Atlantic Ocean, near the coast of Ireland, tranquility turned to catastrophe at 7:14 GMT. A powerful explosion tore through the plane, a result of a bomb hidden in a checked suitcase. The blast was so immense that it ripped the Boeing 747 apart. In an instant, it was a symbol of human achievement in aviation, became a harrowing testament to the destructive power of hatred. The explosion sent the aircraft into an uncontrollable spiral. Pieces of the plane and personal belongings of passengers were strewn across the ocean surface. The serene blue waters of the Atlantic were disrupted by the remnants of Flight 182, marking the spot where 329 lives were abruptly extinguished. Back on land, confusion and chaos ensued. Air traffic control in Shannon, Ireland, lost contact with the flight, initially suspecting a catastrophic mechanical failure. When the plane failed to respond to their desperate calls, a chilling reality began to dawn upon them. Search and rescue operations were quickly mobilized, with Irish naval vessels and aircraft dispatched to the last known location of the flight. The rescue teams were met with a devastating scene. The ocean, usually a vast expanse of undisturbed water, was littered with debris and personal effects. It became abundantly clear that there were no survivors. The scale of the tragedy was immense, representing the deadliest terrorist attack involving an aircraft at the time. The impact was not just in the loss of lives, but also in the shattering of the sense of security that many had in international air travel. Authorities in Canada Ireland, and India, along with other international agencies, began piecing together what happened. The initial disbelief and shock slowly turned into a grim acceptance as evidence pointed towards a bomb. The subsequent investigation would unravel a complex web of events leading to this tragic moment, revealing a plot rooted in political turmoil and extremist ideology. As news of the disaster spread, communities across the globe were plunged into mourning. Families awaited news with sinking hearts, only to have their worst fears confirmed. The bombing of Air India Flight 182 was not just an attack on the plane, it was an assault on humanity itself, leaving a scar that would forever remind the world of the day the skies wept over the Atlantic. The immediate aftermath of the Air India Flight 182 tragedy saw a flurry of investigative activities spearheaded by authorities from Canada, Ireland, and India. The Canadian government, facing one of the most significant challenges in its aviation history, took the lead in the investigation due to the flight's origination from Canada. Simultaneously, Irish authorities commenced a meticulous search operation in the Atlantic, where the aircraft met its catastrophic fate. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police, RCMP, and the Canadian Security Intelligence Service, CSIS, were at the forefront with the challenging task of piecing together the evidence that led to the bombing. The investigation's early days were marked by an urgent need to gather evidence from the wreckage recovered from the ocean, which included personal belongings of the passengers, fragments of the aircraft, and most crucially, the aircraft's black boxes. In India, the tragedy stirred profound shock and grief, prompting the government to collaborate closely with Canadian and Irish authorities. The involvement of multiple nations in the investigation brought forth a complex web of bureaucratic and diplomatic challenges, including differences in legal systems, jurisdictional issues, and the sharing of sensitive information, breakthroughs, and challenges. As the investigation progressed, significant breakthroughs emerged. The analysis of the aircraft's wreckage and black boxes indicated that an explosion occurred in the cargo hold. Further scrutiny led to a chilling revelation. The explosion was caused by a bomb planted in a suitcase. This evidence shifted the focus of the investigation towards a deliberate act of sabotage and terrorism. However, the path of these revelations was not straightforward. One of the most significant challenges was the coordination between the investigating agencies of different countries. Each agency had its own protocols, resources, and priorities, which sometimes led to conflicts and delays in the sharing of critical information. Additionally, the scale of the disaster meant that processing and analyzing the vast amount of evidence was a time-consuming task, compounded by the pressure to provide answers to the grieving families and the public. The political implications of the investigation were profound. The initial suspicion that the bombing was linked to Sikh separatist movements in India brought a geopolitical dimension to the case. This suspicion intensified diplomatic tension, particularly between Canada and India, with the latter expressing concerns about the presence and activities of Sikh separatist groups in Canada. The investigation also revealed glaring shortcomings in airport security measures. It was found that the security screening process were inadequate to detect the type of bomb used in the attack. This realization prompted a global reevaluation of aviation security standards. The investigation into the bombing of Air India Flight 182 was a monumental task that tested the capabilities and cooperation of international law enforcement and intelligence agencies. While significant breakthroughs were made, the journey to uncovering the truth was fraught with challenges, both logistical and political, leaving an indelible mark on the annals of aviation history and international relations. The aftermath of the bombing of Air India Flight 182 unfolded over years, marked by a complex and prolonged legal saga. The initial investigation, hindered by jurisdictional disputes and logistical challenges, took a slow turn towards tangible outcomes. It wasn't until 1991, a significant 6 years after the tragedy, that the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, RCMP, arrested two suspects, Repudaman Singh Malik and Ajab Singh Bagri, both members of the Sikh separatist movement. The trial, which began in 2003, was one of the longest and most expensive in Canadian history, reflecting the intricacies of the case. Held in a specially constructed courtroom, the proceedings were marked by a tapestry of evidence, including intercepted communications, forensic debris analysis from the ocean floor, and testimonies of undercover agents. However, the trial faced critical setbacks, primarily due to the mishandling of evidence and key witnesses' credibility issue. In 2005, the verdict sent shockwaves. Both Malik and Bagri were acquitted of all charges due to the insufficiency of evidence. This outcome ignited a storm of controversy, with many criticizing the Canadian government and judicial system for failing to provide justice for the victims' families. The acquittal underscored significant lapses in the investigation and prosecution, raising questions about counterterrorism preparedness and the handling of complex international terror cases. Impact on aviation security. The bombing of Air India Flight 182 served as a grim milestone in aviation history, profoundly impacting global aviation security. In its wake, several countries, including Canada, India, and the United States, overhauled their airport security protocols. One of the significant changes was the implementation of a more rigorous screening process for both passengers and their luggage. Airports worldwide began adopting X-ray machines for baggage checks and metal detectors for passenger screening, tools that were universally used before the incident. The concept of profiling passengers based on behavior and travel patterns also gained traction, albeit surrounded by controversy over potential racial profiling. Moreover, the tragedy highlighted the need for better coordination and information sharing between international intelligence agencies. The lack of effective communication had been a critical flaw that possibly allowed the tragedy to occur. In response, countries bolstered their efforts to establish more robust networks for sharing intelligence related to terrorist threats, a move that would later form the backbone of many counterterrorism strategies. In essence, the legal aftermath of the bombing of Air India Flight 182, fraught with controversies and setbacks, served as a stark reminder of the challenges in prosecuting international terrorism. Simultaneously, it catalyzed a global shift towards more stringent aviation security measures, reshaping the landscape of international air travel with a lasting emphasis on safety and vigilance. The bombing of Air India Flight 182 left an indelible mark on the families of the victims and their communities. The loss of 329 lives, including 268 Canadians, 27 British citizens, and 24 Indians, represented a staggering human tragedy. For the families, the grief was immeasurable. Many had lost their entire families, and for them, life would never be the same again. The pain was exacerbated by the drawn-out investigation and trial, which stretched over decades, denying them closure. In the wake of the tragedy, communities across Canada, India, and the UK came together in grief. Annual memorials became a key part of the healing process. In Toronto, a memorial was erected at Humber Bay Park East, inscribed with the names of the victims. These memorials served not just as a tribute to those lost, but also as a reminder of the community's resilience in the face of such a devastating event. They became places where families and community members could gather to share their grief and support each other. The bombing had far-reaching implications for international relations, especially between Canada, India, and Ireland. The incident exposed gaps in international security and highlighted the need for better cooperation in intelligence sharing and security protocols. In Canada, the incident led to a re-evaluation of its approach to national security and counterterrorism. The Canadian government faced criticism for its handling of the Sikh separatist movement, which was linked to the bombing, and this necessitated a more nuanced approach to domestic and international politics concerning extremism and terrorism. The bombing intensified the already strained relations between the Sikh community and the government, especially in the context of the Punjab insurgency and the 1984 Operation Blue Star. Ireland, dealing with its own issues related to terrorism, found itself thrust into the international spotlight, having to navigate the complexities of this global tragedy. Despite the years that have passed since the bombing, certain aspects of the case remain shrouded in mystery. Questions linger about the extent of the intelligence failure, the possibility of additional conspirators, and the true motivations behind the attack. Some family members of the victims continue to seek answers, not fully satisfied with the official account of events. These unanswered questions keep the story of Air India Flight 182 alive in the public conscience, serving as a reminder of the complexities and challenges in combating global terrorism. The legacy of the tragedy is not only in the loss of life, but also in the lessons learned and the unanswered questions that continue to spur discussions on aviation security, intelligence, and the handling of extremist threats. Just a reminder, if you made it to the end of this video, don't hesitate to like the video and subscribe if you haven't. Until next time, thanks for watching.